Okay. Hey guys, how are you?
Hello.
And,
Hi.
and welcome to everyone joining us to the Pints and Prototypes podcast. This is actually our second podcast. And today we have our very own Natalie joining us, customer success manager. And what we do in this podcast, essentially, we just share a beer and talk about all things UX, UI with focus on prototyping. We have a very special guest with us today, and I'll let Natalie introduce.
Cool. Yeah. Thanks, Jack. So we have Brian Demchak joining us. He is a senior UX designer with AAA, and very excited to have Brian here with us. He and I have been working together since 2015 when he first started using UXPin. So I'm happy and excited to dive into that a little more. But Brian, I'll let you share a little bit about yourself before we get started. Yeah.
Yeah, sure. I can go ahead and share a little bit. Yeah, so I've been working for AAA for about a little over 14 years now. I started there as a web designer. So, before UX was a super big buzzword, we got hired to basically do designs in Photoshop, disseminate those, and try to get some approvals, right? Those days. And so I've been kind of working with AAA throughout the years to kind of build out their ecosystem and understanding of UX and evolving myself and understanding that as well, and kind of putting in that process within the association to try to help with all the things that you hear all the time these days: consistency and the application of how we build user experiences, and making sure that no matter wherever a AAA member goes, they're going to have the same experience, the same quality, and the same value that they expect with the membership. So yeah, so it's been a good journey. There's a lot to unpack there. Like being with a company for almost 15 years, especially AAA, that's been around for over 100 years. When you talk about legacy and collecting a lot of debt from the past, this is definitely a company that we can talk about that's had that complexity to work through. But I have to tell you, great company to work for. Super happy to be there. I've been there 15 years and don't see myself leaving. So super happy.
Great,
Yeah.
man. Thanks. And I believe you're in my old stomping grounds of Orlando, right? Orlando,
Yeah. Oh,
Florida.
yeah. I didn't mention that. Yeah. So
Yeah.
AAA, where I work out, the headquarters here is in Lake Mary, Florida, and I actually live in Orlando, Florida, so not too far from Lake Mary. Yeah.
Cool. And as you know, we do share a beer in this podcast.
Oh, yeah.
I used to
I'm
live
excited about
in
this part.
Orlando. Yeah, I used to
All
live in
right.
Orlando, and I am now in Colorado. Last episode I shared. I'm trying to highlight some of the microbreweries here. We have so many. Last week I shared one out of Littleton, and it is Palisades Peaches season here. So I
Ooh.
am drinking Peach Stand Rambler by O'Doul's Beer, right out of Fort Collins. I'm actually about 20 minutes from Fort Collins, and I really enjoy the artwork in this one. It's peach pale ale. So, what are you drinking, Brian?
Yeah, so I picked a local beer as well, just to throw some props out there. But I've tried to pick the most metal beer can I could get, and I don't mean metal like what it's made out of. So if you look here, this is such a cool label.
Yeah, that's dope.
See this right here. So this is Moon Boots, and it's done by Sideward Brewery here in Orlando, Florida. Actually, not too far from me. I can almost ride a bike to them.
Right on.
Yeah, so it's an IPA. I'm a big IPA person. I like double IPAs too. So, but
Oh,
Oh,
cheers.
nice.
Yeah.
I'm also representing a local brewery from California, Lost Coast Brewery. It's about 4 hours away from me, though, but I have to admit that I'm totally being a poser today because this is actually like green tea in here. It's brown. It's brown liquid, but I have to pick up my my daughter after this. So which I really like the sound of your peach beer, Jack, because the other weekend we went to go pick peaches at a farm. So I want to know how that one tastes,
yeah,
and
it's
maybe you'll have to
refreshing
send
and
me
delicious. So far,
maybe
yeah.
you'll have to send me some.
Absolutely, yeah.
All right.
So,
Well,
as you can
cheers.
see, cheers. So, Natalie is our voice of reason, as always. So yeah, enjoy your beers, guys, and let's just jump into it. Brian, you've been with us with UXPin as a client since 2015, and you mentioned that that's essentially when you started working with AAA. So you've gone through quite a bit of evolution with us. You're actually, we consider you a friend, not just a client. You've helped us really evolve our product and consult with us many times. We thank you for that. Essentially, how did UXPin come to the equation with AAA? Were we already signed up as your vendor prior to you getting there, or did you have any play in that?
Yeah, it's a great question to start out with, Jack. So, yeah, so real quick. So when I started at AAA, like I said, I was considered a web designer, and I had to have some understanding of like HTML and some CSS because I would help with that part of it. But it wasn't like requirement. It was just kind of a bonus. And at the time, we pretty much were just dealing with, doing designs, and then they were very flat, not interactive, you know, um, not super easy to edit, right? Because you're dealing with Photoshop. That was the main tool that we used at the time. And so, after working there for like a year or so, and just doing research and kind of following the industry, there were some things that I wanted to implement. And at the time, I was the only like web designer on the team. So I was kind of like, the Lone Ranger. And I had a big team of developers that I had to support. I think at the time it was like close to like 18 or 20. And we were managing not just consumer facing products, but also internal facing products. And at that time, AAA was just really getting their feet wet with roadside assistance being an online thing and even being an app that you could download and do your roadside at that point. So again, kind of starting out from there, like UX was still kind of a buzzword. It was kind of being brought in. So after about a year or so working there, they decided to hire another UX designer in another area of the department I worked in. And when he started, we started collaborating and started sharing, pain points and how we would maybe work together to try to deal with that.
Mhm.
And so immediately we, at that time converted over to Sketch. We were using Sketch a lot, right? So we went from Photoshop right into that. And we started diving into using third-party plugins to start to create kind of like some kind of prototype. But the biggest complexity we dealt with at that point was that when we actually went to go do development handoff, they were still kind of just dealing with this flat file. And they would have to figure out how to build that design out, right? And we would hope for the best that they would get it to look pixel perfect and have no hiccups,
Mhm.
And so at that time, we had said, look, let's go out and look at the ecosystem. Let's see what is available for us to maybe use that can fix, prototyping and fix, developer handoff and help us create more consistency between designs. Because even though we were kind of in different teams, we needed some type of way to keep things consistent between the two of us, even though the systems we were working on required different inputs and different things like that, right? So kind of just speed tracking up. So that's when UXPin came into the picture. We actually did research and ran across you guys. And so I think at that time, my coworker and I did like a trial run of the product, and we liked it. We thought that it was it fixed a lot of things that we needed. And so I think, Natalie, that's when my coworker reached out to you that time and basically started to create kind of a connection between us. And I think the first thing was, hey, let's meet about UXPin and stuff. And I think at the time, like we were still not 100% like, hey, we're going to do this because there was a cost to it. And whenever you're dealing with like, environments like AAA, and I don't know if everybody knows, but AAA is a nonprofit company, which is really interesting. A lot of people don't know that, but they are.
I did not know that.
If you look into the history of AAA, I have to tell you, it's pretty awesome. Like all the things they've influenced and done. But ultimately, so I don't lose my train. So we basically were kind of like, let's evaluate this, let's work this out, let's try to figure out what product's best. And we ended up, after meeting with you, Natalie, kind of talking about the plan, working out the money, how much it was going to need to be allocated from the budget, and getting that first final approval. That's when we started using UXPin. And I think that was after I was there for just about 4 years. So it took, again, like I was there about a year and a half, then another designer came in, we started collaborating. Like a year later, that's when we started working with UXPin, something like that. And then from that point, we just started kind of diving into that world of UXPin and trying to understand the product, how it wanted the workflow to work, because that's the one thing that I thought was really intuitive about UXPin when we first started using it, is that it was easy to kind of understand what the expectation was of us, right, using the tool and how to kind of work through the steps, right? But you got to remember back then, component driven design still was kind of new.
Hmm.
So the understanding of how to do that, even on my side, was still pretty novice, right?
Right.
So we were just breaking down everything into states visually. We'd label everything, lots of documentation,
Hmm.
tremendous amount of documentation, all done by hand, very time consuming, right? And so that's when I think now that at some point you started teaching us some of the other things that UXPin could do, and we started implementing that, the documentation, the developer handoff, right, and
Mhm.
stuff like that. So that's kind of how it rolled. It was it wasn't a luck of the draw. It was really just evaluating, and at the time UXPin was providing a lot of things we were looking for, and we just dived in. Yeah.
Right. Let me get some context here for our viewers. So back then, we were the first prototyping tool that came out that utilized, and to some degree, we're still the only one that utilized live code to design with. So you weren't just using raster and bitmaps; you were actually creating HTML. So this allowed us to enhance the product quite a bit, allowing us to leverage JavaScript to allow you as the user to create interactions that really brought the prototype alive. And of course, it being rooted off code, the handoff was just so much more evolved than anything in the market at the time because you were actually getting CSS and HTML
Yep.
handoff, not just flat files. Or so you were getting colors, you were getting tokens, you were getting all the assets, the typography elements, and then along with that, the CSS code. Also, very robust previewing and team management capabilities. And that was UXPin Classic even from its start. We've
Mhm.
evolved quite a bit. You mentioned component prototyping, and we're going to jump into merge in a little while,
Yep.
which is really deep into the component driven prototyping.
Hmm.
However, one thing we also offered was back then was design system creation and documentation. So I believe you guys started with a classic design system that you created in UXPin. Can you share a little bit about that, how that came to be, and what it
Yeah,
offers?
so that's a good question too. So yeah, so I guess we were working with UXPin. I want to say once we integrated it and we were really using it and we were starting to see the benefits of the developer handoff, like you said, the HTML, the CSS, all this stuff kind of happening. That's when, we kind of dived more into, doing more with UXPin in regards to consistency. So for example, right, like spacing, like things like that, pixel pushing, I call it, right? When you have a lot of different designers going in and doing that, right? That's when things start looking different, right? So here's what we did. We said, okay, what can we do? Oh, UXPin's got this component driven, DS element to it, right? So that's when me and my coworkers started collaborating on, okay, let's build a system out now. Now that we've used UXPin, we know how to design with it. We've done some prototypes and we've gotten approvals. We've done this. Now let's take it to the next step. Because again, whenever, at least for me, whenever I'm learning something, right, I like to take everything incrementally. I don't like to dive into the best feature right off the bat because I feel like I'm not going to get the most out of the tool if I don't understand the basic stuff, right? So once we got through that, right, and we said, okay, we don't need Sketch anymore. We don't need this. We can move on. And we're completely, in UXPin 100%. We're not using old prototypes. We're not reverting to old stuff, right? When we were completely converted over, all right, that's when we dived into the classic stuff and actually building a design system out. And one of the first products that we really, really utilized this for was for one of our travel products. Um, and it worked out really, really well, right? But again, with multiple products going on around us, right, like the design system has to fit all those needs. And that's when at that time I started diving pretty heavy into atomic design, right? Understand atomic design, understand a component driven design process, and that's how we built the classic merge design system. We used those principles, right? So we started building it out, and it started working really, really well. At the time when we implemented it, when it was fully done, we had a team of 5 designers that were basically we were developing a product from scratch. And whenever we would do design thinking sessions, which we did a tremendous amount of them, we would use that design system, and we were blowing them away how quickly we could build prototypes and do like full on user testing within a week and come out with results. I mean, we were basically, for the most part, doing design sprints where we would go like 5 days. we'd start with day one, we'd bring, people in, interview them. And by the end of the week, we would have a prototype that we would have fully built, and we would test it on the last day and share all those results with the team. It's a pretty standard design thinking process, but it was super beneficial having UXPin have that ability for us to build that design system out, because all the designers were able to disseminate and conquer and come out with something that looked like it came from one designer. So that's big kudos to you guys. So once we did that, right, that's when we started really getting excited about what the future looked like. And I think that's where you guys are going to probably want to lead to is once we started to implement and mastered that side of it, you guys started talking to us about, well, hey, you guys use Storybook. I don't know if you remember, Natalie, I think you might, or maybe you, Jack, might have been the first one who had mentioned that to us. And that was our next step. Once we understood that process using UXPin, we were like, okay, now it's time to really start thinking about what design system really is. It's not just the classic DS inside UXPin. It's too isolated. It's very specific. You can only access it, right? Like it got to be a real conversation. So,
yeah.
If that helps at all, explain that.
Yeah, our design system that you built with the documentation, our classic design system, that's also helpful to keep the consistency with your designers, having the library and the editor, but also having the documentation handed over to your devs too. And I think when we introduced Merge, actually designing with coded components, it really aligned because you were already doing the atomic design approach. So I think our conversations just kind of happened naturally, and it just made sense to talk about Merge with you. And it was a perfect timing because we were launching that, and you were also advancing your design system too. So I feel like we both progressed with Merge, as well as you were fine-tuning your design system, and it was able to help each other out, I guess, with the structure of how Merge components work.
It was a good introduction, and I think it just I think even when we were talking in our meetings, you included Jack, we were kind of already in the pocket with where the product was going. I think we all were in the mindset of, okay, this makes sense. And I know that's when we really started talking about, okay, what's the next steps? And I think for us, Storybook was the next step. So I don't know what your next question is there, Jack, because I could go on for a while with this one. But that's how we did it. So we implemented the classic, fully integrated it, used it with, a pretty good sized design team, and it worked out really well. I would say real quick before we move on, I don't know if this works into the question or not, but it'll lead into why we chose Merge, right, in the end of all of this, right? But even with the classic approach and everything being really mature, you're still dealing with the development team interpreting, right? Mm-hmm. So we'll leave it at that, because no matter what happens, you're going to end up at that junction, right? You're going to end up with, does the development team understand how we want this built? And even if you give them a design token file that's fully spec'd out, that's a great starting point. But when you're dealing with responsive design, you're dealing with the anatomy and how you structure pages, it can get really squirrely, right? So
that's exactly what the conclusion we came to, right? Like, we have this great tool now that definitely starts bridging the gap between communication between designers and developers, but it wasn't quite there yet. At the end of the day, you're creating a pattern library. You're not using real code. You're there's still a disconnect there. And that's where the idea of Merge came. And to give some context, what Merge does is it fully bridges that gap between design and development, because we're now going to use code as that bridge between the two departments. In other words, designers are going to design with code, those coded components, and developers are actually going to get handoff code utilizing the coded components that are part of your tech stack already. So we released beta. I believe you jumped on with us in beta, and we started exploring it. It was a messy process. The integration process was hard to understand. There was a lot of prepping that needed to be done. You mentioned you were a little fearful of adoption, and you kind of had to get some development support for that trial. So how did you overcome that fear and how of adoption, and how did you approach within your company to get the support from development to pursue this?
Yeah. Well, just to kind of go back to the storybook thing. So once we really started looking at storybook and saying, okay, look, is this an artifact that we should create and maintain, right? And at the time, we knew it was a development artifact, so we were like, okay, we'll have the development team create this layering, and then they can maintain that, and we'll use that for testing interactions and the whole UI layer, and isolate that out so that way development doesn't have to be hindered with testing, all that cross-browser stuff. We could actually get in there and do that. But when we actually looked at it, we're like, oh, wow, this is like front-end development work. This is like a full-stack developer right here. I mean, this is really somebody who needs to know their stuff, and it requires, a pipeline. It requires QA environment. It requires, all kinds of different things. And so when you start breaking it down, right, when you think about the development effort of it, that's where it gets intimidating, because now you got to think about, okay, who's going to do the work, who's going to maintain it, what's the governance of it, and how are we going to increment this into sprints with multiple products, and how is that going to work? I mean, when you really look at it from that perspective, that's where you start to really say, okay, look, we got to think this out. It's a little bit more complex than we thought. But once we started having the conversations with some of our executive leaders and like talking about the efficiencies of the things that we wanted to fix, there was a real interest in pursuing it. And at the time, there was an opportunity for us to use some additional resources to try to build out Storybook, right? And so we took advantage of this period of time where we had some extra resources, and we started building Storybook out. And within a quick period of time, Storybook proved itself to be very, very useful. And we said, okay, look, we need to actually get on this full time. And that's where I kind of came into the picture, because at this time, I had done so much development and worked with so many developers, and I had a JavaScript, background, just, naturally being in web design and stuff like that. So I actually, took it upon myself. I learned React, and I jumped in and I started helping develop the design system using Atomic Design, building out Storybook. And it took, I'll be honest with you, it took about 4.5 years probably total, because we did it from scratch, and there's reasons for that. I don't know if you want to get into that, but we could have used Material UI. We could have used some off-the-shelf design systems. There's great ones out there. But ultimately with us, we wanted to make sure we had control, which big companies, when they have a lot of products like AAA does, and there's a lot of things that has to be documented, a lot of things that has to be accounted for and stuff like that, it just makes sense for us with the kind of company to build our own in-house design system. So we did it. Once it was fully built, we circled right back around to merge, right? Mm-hmm. And I think we had some conversations around, hey, do we even need merge now that we got Storybook, right? It's like we do our designs with the classic approach. We have a team that builds out Storybook, creates the stories. Those stories become a developer handoff, and you have this perfect handoff where it's like, I'm going to copy the code right out of Storybook. I'm going to put in all my, business logic, and I'm going to be done. And immediately within 5 years, our process became so efficient, right? Because it's implementation. But there was still that question. It was like, but wait a minute, guys, can we do better? And that's where Merge came in. And we started implementing Merge, and taking our design system, our React design system, and coding it in to UXPin. And I have to tell you, it's pretty amazing what you guys have done with the product and how this whole thing works to begin with. But now that we've fully integrated it, and I know you're probably gonna have questions on this, it's pretty wild. I mean, we're still, even with it implemented and us using it, we're still learning all the possibilities you can do with this new design process that we have in place, right? And it's, again, comes back to developer handoff. That's going to be the number one thing that stays top of mind. And we've talked about this a lot. Is it really developers that need a design software that spells it out for them? Is it designers that need design software that spells out development for them? What is the question, right? How do you answer that? Well, I think the answer is all the above. The product needs a service, the developer needs a service, the designer. Most importantly, the designer, right? Because developers have their skills and we have ours, right? But ultimately, that's where we ended up. So I think once Storybook was fully integrated into our design process, it was part of everything we did. It just made sense to say, hey, look, let's get this into UXPin. So, yeah.
Yeah, that brings us around That was around 2021 when you joined us, and then Natalie worked heavily with you in consulting and
Oh yeah.
walking you through it. Natalie, can you think of any questions around that time frame? I know the next year we released the Git integration. You know, and this
Yeah.
until now, Brian was exploring the storybook integration, but then we released the Git integration, which allowed you to actually connect a repo directly to merge, meaning all your React components were now available and accessible in an atomic way to be able to compose the UX experience out of those, and of course expose all the properties that those components are able of managing.
Mhm.
So, Natalie, what did you find around this time in working with Brian?
Yeah, I feel like at that time they were when he shared their design system with me, Brian, when you shared about your design system, I remember it being at a very mature state. But a question that comes to mind is how did you determine that your design system was ready for merge?
Yeah, that's a good question too. So I would say ultimately it's all about development effort, right? All hands on deck. Let's get Storybook built out. Let's make it fully documented, fully robust. Everything's there, right? We have clear pipelines for everything. Everything's accounted for. We have approval processes. Everything's in place, right? So it's not just Storybook. It's the ecosystem around it, right? Everybody understands what we're doing, because that's another thing with big companies like AAA, any corporation, right? That's been doing stuff for a very long time. There's a debt there, right? And there's also a trained understanding, right, of where they are today. And sometimes when you're trained that way, it's hard for you to see where you're going to go, right? So it's real important for us to kind of paint that picture for them. But it's like when you're at this point when you're saying, okay, look, I gotta train everybody on this and make sure they understand the power and the benefit of it, that they're going to continue to put money towards it, right? Because everything's about funding. So ultimately, we got to that point. When I tell you, like, our design process got to a point where it was so fluid that they were just asking so many questions. How'd you do it? What's this? What's that? That's when we knew we were ready. It's like, okay, so now we've got this. Let's go ahead and put all hands on deck with UXPin. Let's get this built out, right? And that's what we did. And we started using the Get approach. We started building that out, and again, learning that process, because now it's another pipeline, right? It's another development artifact that you have to maintain, and we have to understand the debt of that. And I think anybody that's going to use UXPin and use Merge, they have to understand the debt if they're going to even see the benefit of it, right? Because in the end, if you feel comfortable with how you're going to maintain it, you're going to see how efficient it's going to be for you in the end, right? Because in reality, no matter what you do, whether you're just using UXPin to design, which is fine. I've talked to a lot of designers like, look, I just need, sometimes Figma comes up a lot, right? XD comes up a lot, right? But I tell them, I'm going, that's when you're talking about these products, and they're all very good products. They're all trying to do very similar things that you guys are doing. You really get down to really understand architecture and how companies work when they deal with digital products. And that's where I think experience comes in. And I didn't have it at first. I gained it working at AAA and understanding how that works and how big companies work. And I think that's really important. It's not just turning designs out. Like, don't get me wrong, like, there's lots of great designers out there that can take a concept and turn it into a beautiful web page, but they may not understand like how to architect that, or maybe they design something that's very complex to architect, right? And so that's where you get into this kind of thing where it's really like, do I understand UX from an architectural perspective to even build the design system and understand how to use it? And I think that's where you get a lot of intimidated designers, because they're like, well, do I even need this? Should I worry about it? And I mean, I'm told I should, but if I give them a good design, it's their responsibility to develop it, right? That's what I'm paying them for, right? That's the mindset. But in reality, good design doesn't come from that kind of process. Everybody has to be on the same page and has an efficient process where everybody understands everything that's coming every step of the way and can predict it. And again, I'll use that word predictability here, because that's what we're really marching towards, right? Is we want to be able to predict what the outcome's going to be from everything we design, right? So, yeah. I don't know if I went off on a tangent there and lost the question, but
you need to take a couple of sips of beer, though.
Yeah. Yeah.
Going back to good UX design, it's also about testing.
Yep.
Um, we're not just focused on how pretty things look, it's how they function. And
Yep.
the only way to understand that is by testing and getting feedback and research. So with UXPin, especially with these live components, it's very easy to create different iterations that test the whole path, the whole user journey, versus just a single feature that you might do in something like Figma by flipping a couple of artboards. Here, you can build out the whole experience because all those behaviors and hooks and interactions are available to you. And then, of course, you can do A and B testing and usability testing. You can even do accessibility testing by plugging in ARIA tags and all that stuff, and then testing it with screen readers and such. So, what UXPen really tries to do is touch the whole life cycle of UX design, including research, accessibility, scale, and of course that documentation, that connection of everything. That without documentation, you don't have a design system. That's the
Yeah.
driving force of the
And
design.
definitely automation is what the future's all about, right? We're all
Mhm.
looking towards automation. And I'm not intimidated by automation because I feel like anything that gets more efficient, I got more time to focus on the things that aren't efficient, right? So I'm not intimidated by that at all. There is a couple things I did want to mention. I don't mean to jump in here. I know
No, please.
if you guys have additional questions, but I just want to talk a little bit because, now that we've incorporated Merge and we're fully designing with coded components now from our design system, we have started to look at the philosophy of what we're doing. Okay. Because it's one thing to just go, okay, I'm putting an image on the page, I'm putting some text on a page, and I'm creating a layout. I mean, when you use atoms, right, in design, it's pretty straightforward. I mean, anybody that understands design at the base level can go in there and be pretty dangerous, right? But that doesn't solve, right, the developer handoff in the perfect way, right? So we decided is if we're going to train people on how to use this coded design system in UXPin, it's going to have to retrain their mind a little bit, right? So they understand that they're not just thinking about design, but they're also thinking about structure. And not only structure, but layout, right? And we say that and like, oh, well, I do that all the time when I design. I'm always thinking about layout and structure. It's a little different, okay? Because we're going back to pixel pushing, right? So now we're at this point in our process where we're trying to come up with what's the philosophy of how you approach design now with the coded components so that everybody's doing the same thing. And so I'll give you a little window into kind of what we're looking at right now. And it's like basically you have this concept of I'll just do like the classic UXPin approach, but using our design system. You can have a designer go in and create a whole layout just using the atoms. They could go to town, create whatever they want, right? They want a 2-column layout, a single column, 3-column, whatever they want, right? But at some point, they're still pixel pushing. They're still moving all these little atoms around on the page and making sure everything's spaced perfectly. This is where we take them into the second phase. The second phase is now that you've designed it all laid out the way you want it to look, let's get it into a layout, right? So we have layout components that we built, and they're very powerful. We use them all the way across through development. And it's nothing, I mean, Material UI does something very similar. We have a little spin on it, but it's pretty much verbatim, very similar to theirs. And so we tell our designers, okay, now you're going to put that into a layout. So they'll pick what they want, and we have all kinds of layout containers that they can use. Once they do that, they drop it in. Now it's locked. They don't have to worry about spacing anymore. They don't have to worry about it. All just magically just spaces perfectly. Now they got a section, see? So they started out with what do I want it to look like? Here's my layout. Now here's my section. And so now we're taking that section and we put it into a whole design, right? So we've kind of broke it down, and that's the philosophy we're using because it's, it's, you got to get used to it, right? Because you're going from this idea of like, I've been trained this way. I just design away and don't think. The properties panel actually makes things easier, right? And what's happened now is our designers are becoming coders just by using UXPin because
Up for sure.
they're learning the props, they're learning the component names, they're learning the ecosystem. And the best part about this is, to be honest, is the developer handoff. I mean, I haven't got a measurement for you guys yet, but I'm going to work on this for you. It's how much more efficient it is getting that full code set without any business logic, mind you. Because Storybook, we do have some logic in there for testing. We do add API calls into our Storybook stories to test, different data coming in, different amounts of it. You know how it goes, test and layout. Sometimes it comes in on the page, sometimes it's not there. You got to account for that. But ultimately now it's like we take that code and it literally goes into Storybook like a copy and paste.
Yeah.
So a little bit of massaging on it just to get it fully responsive across device, very little. And then now that's ready for developer handoff. So I'm seeing just off the top, a large percentage increase in efficiency. And that's really important to note here is that all that upfront debt is all about the efficiency at the end. And that's what I was trying to say. That's the intimidating part, right? It's like, is it worth the squeeze, right? For the end. So.
Yeah. And a benefit that's often overlooked, you touched up on it, is that designers are now using the real properties, right? Named exactly as the developer will reference them.
Yep.
Using understanding, for example, in a layout component, like you mentioned, let's say you have a grid component, and you might have properties per breakpoint of how many columns that grid should scale out to. Designers are now understanding how a developer codes these grids, and they can understand the limitations and the workarounds. At the same time, now your designers are talking to your developers in the same jargon. We're talking about not columns, but the breakpoint. We're talking about the breakpoint property. We have the nomenclature in place to really communicate and stop that gap that we have between the two departments that seems
That's right.
forever we've been trying to resolve. So that's a great point. And you started using Merge in its infancy, so you've seen it come a long way.
Oh yeah.
So in your case, you needed to have a design system that's already pretty evolved in order to take advantage of what we had. Whereas now we have tools such as a bilateral process that allows you to take the coded component and break it apart and go back to the design phase, the ideation phase. Would you say that now with some of the tooling that you've seen, Merge can actually, in fact, be used more as a tool to develop the design system, the product that you actually needed initially to integrate with Merge? Is there an exploration, a UI exploration aspect to it that, and bridging those two environments that could have helped you come to that end product quicker?
So let me make sure I understand the question. So are you saying using Material UI versus what we did from scratch, or are you meaning just?
Yeah, I understand. I think I understand the question. So Material UI, for some, for who might not know, is an open source framework that gives you essentially all the atoms, all the components in an atomic format that you need for a design system. And of course, you can theme it and create one. Of course, we offer that right out of the box, so you can create your own personalized design system from that root.
Yep.
In the case of Brian, he started out from scratch. These were not rooted off of any. So it started out with pixels, essentially, designing these and then coding them.
Yep.
The question, Brian, was, do you think a client would still need to have a coded component system, or could they start with Classic and the Merge offerings and evolve to a coded component system with the tooling that's now in place, like breaking away and going back to ideation?
Well, here's okay. So that's a tricky one to answer, but I do understand the question. So thanks for re-explaining it, Jack. So, this is the development thing. We're getting into development land a little bit, right? So I think if you have a development team that's very familiar with Material UI and they're happy with using it, then that might be something you want to leverage, especially when you're starting with a product that hasn't been visualized yet. So we're talking about a project that's basically in its strategy stage. It's like, what do we need and how are we going to solve for it, right? If you're starting at that junction, you could say, hey, look, I want a development team that knows Material UI really well because we're going to use it in UXPin to build out our design system. I think, to your point, Jack, absolutely you could do that. You could absolutely do that, right? We just didn't follow that path. Mm-hmm. Like I said, we started with Storybook, and that kind of led us into, hey, let's do it from scratch, because there's a lot of things unique to AAA. And there was also a development understanding where we were like, okay, we could simplify the performance of the way that we build our design system, actually make the design system more efficient for performance purposes. Like we can go underneath the hood and we can do our own little trickery, right? And that's going to, mind you, like if you have a development team, like if you look at Apple, for example, right? Just kind of name dropping Apple, but they're another company that have their own design system, and they have a lot of products that they maintain, and they try to keep everything similar and consistent, same complexity we deal with, right? It's like at some point, I think it's really dependent upon what the development team can do. That's your first thing you have to answer. Do they want to use Material Y? Are they a team that feels like they could build the design system out from scratch for this particular product because it's unique? Are they going to use something off the shelf that maybe UXPin doesn't provide, right? Like Shopify or something like that, right? Like that's something that's really popular these days for people who are doing, anything that deals with commerce and stuff like that, right? So it's not a one size fits all. I think, you're going to deal with a lot of custom design systems coming out here in the near future. I think you're going to see a lot more of it because it's gotten way easier, right? That's another thing too. And also you've got Webflow. Webflow is doing some really interesting stuff as well with design system integration and stuff like that. Because a lot of people now these days, they're looking at like CMSs. Oh, that's another thing to mention. Our design system is completely tied into a CMS now. Okay. So you can build complete pages out in a CMS using our design system. So we've got a full ecosystem now, which is pretty wild because even our designers are going to start going in. That team is going to do their designs in UXPin. That's where we're going to hopefully build out this whole UXPin ecosystem and get the whole association and the design teams involved, because I think, this is the future. I mean, I think this is where everybody's going to go anyway. So to answer your point, yes, they can definitely do it. We just didn't, it's just not the way we did it. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay. And around 23, we experimented with responsiveness. We didn't have responsive layouts quite yet. You were very integral in helping us find a workaround that we weren't even familiar with. I believe they were component level queries, right? Responsive queries. So that really drove us to wanting to have a in-app solution. So we developed responsive frames, which now allow you to design in the editor at different breakpoints and actually see how those coded components are reacting.
It's really cool.
And I know you and Natalie worked quite a bit in setting up meetings and really helping us out. At UXPin, any feature that comes to the platform is driven by our clients. So when we knew you had this pain point, you were the perfect person to kind of help us develop the solution, and we did, and it's working out great. So thank you for that.
No problem.
Natalie, where were we at after that? And we kind of cleared out the responsive stuff, and then
I think after that, like to 2024, I believe it was. You folks shared that you were very happy with the design system. It was at a sophisticated state. And maybe you can talk a little bit more about what it was like after having those responsive layouts in place, Brian.
That's good. We're moving right along here. I think it feels like we're moving in the right direction here. So the responsive design stuff you guys did that we collaborated on was very, very powerful. It's so powerful that we have to rethink some of our components, right? So we've done some changes in our design system because we'll nerd out just for a quick second, all right? So get into some development talk here. So if any of the viewers or anybody listening to this, I apologize. You can always go research some of this stuff if you don't. But you've got this thing called style components in React. Or that's not just React, just in the concept of style components. And basically what you're dealing with like an ecosystem in development where you're controlling the styling from a single layer, and then that styling is kind of available everywhere you develop, right? It's not necessarily like you need style sheets, like CSS style sheets. Now, if anybody knows, you can have a lot of style sheets sometimes. It can get a little crazy, especially legacy products. You're trying to figure out, okay, what's this, what's that? And then you get into this situation where you're like, man, I'm bouncing files. It's like, I got to go here, I got to go there. Da, da, da. And so we ended up coming up with this hybrid approach. We kind of did a little bit of both. We have very little page level CSS. It's all at the atom level. Everything else is done as you're writing. So it's all, I think it's implicit, I think is the right word. Don't quote me on that, but developer programming. So basically everybody codes right as they're writing. So the whole component, all the styling, everything is just done right there. We don't file hop anymore. The only time you file hop is like if you're dealing with atoms and you have to make tweaks, which is really rare. So that's an important thing to note. So we evolved the DS with that. And then we created what we have as a media query component, which is funny, Jack, because you had talked about this in the past, but we actually created one that's pretty robust and we use it on all our products and stuff like that. So now we don't even use media queries and CSS necessarily. It is behind the scenes is what it's doing, but ultimately, yeah, but for the developer, they just use the media query wrapper, or we use like an inline media query prop driven approach where you can actually pass in your breakpoints. It's really efficient. And we started doing that. So now we're taking that, we're rolling it into UXPin, and now we're getting into some crazy stuff. So here in the near future, we should be able to show that you can design once and have all your breakpoints accounted for, which is a beautiful thing because, again, top of point here is efficiency, right? And developer handoff. So how efficient is your design process, right? Like how quick can you turn quality around consistently? That's what makes our stakeholders, all our investors in AAA, everybody that's what gets them excited, right? Because they want to see quality consistently. They don't want to see it, oh, that was really good, but what happened over here? Like that becomes a pain point, right? So, so yeah, so we've built that out. So we're getting ready to get into back to using what you guys had built in even a different way. So, so I'll keep you posted on that.
We're interested to see what you come up with. Yeah. Okay. So now you're at the place, I think last time we talked about, you actually mentioned that you might be getting close to a place where you can share it with other, I think you mentioned regional clubs or other, is that the right term, or other departments, expanding on the usage of this, getting more adoption within AAA as a whole. Have you shown this off yet to other parts of the company? What kind of feedback, and where do you see this going internally?
Yeah, it's a good question. So we're right at the point where we're closing the chapter on this, I wouldn't say super long journey, but a fun journey, right? Where we've learned about like not only technology in this sector, right, and how we want to use it, but now we've actually learned, okay, here's the best things to talk about when you're talking about this technology, because that's another thing, right? There's a lot to unpack. And when you're dealing with people who are like, I don't need to know that. What is that? What are you talking about? And that's a problem. So we've now gotten to a point where we go, okay, we can talk about the things that everybody understands. So now we've got that planned. Everything's in place. We can demo. We've actually been doing demoing. We've been sharing with designers around our offices and departments. And now the plan is once we have everybody integrated in our office, we're going to start to communicate with clubs. Now, not to get into the nuts and bolts how AAA is set up, but it's a big company. It's got to service a lot of people on the side of the road, a lot of lives to save. So they break up territories, right? And those territories are run by clubs, and they all work together with us to create that consistent user experience from the moment the member walks out the door all the way to whatever they're doing, right? So there's this opportunity now to say, hey, look, guys, now that we've got this built out, we've got products that are very successful that are using it. What can you guys do with it now, right? And I think one of the things we're going to get into with you guys is AI. I think for us, that's the next logical step. And the reason why we want to go down that route, the main one, is legacy products. Jack, you demoed for us last time some amazing stuff where you were able to take a screenshot of a web page and completely convert it into a design system of choice that you had loaded up. And I think that's killer, because for us, we've got a lot of departments with old pages and they're like, well, guys, how are we going to do this overnight? How are we going to do this? Well, here's a real quick rundown. All you have to do, take a screenshot, bring it in UXPin, convert it over. And they're going to go, what is this you just did? Because they're still not going to completely understand. Then we say to them, look, let me show you what's going to happen. Now that we've done this, we can actually already hand this off to a developer. It's already at a point where your development team can start to work with it, right? We don't need to train. A lot of it's spelled out. Our naming, that's another thing. You could do a whole podcast on how to structure this stuff, right? Naming conventions to everything, right? But if you do it the right way, it's pretty intuitive. Brad Frost, I think he's, I remember, I first got into him and, learning about atomic design and all that stuff. It's honestly, for me, it was a big game changer.
It was. To me, it all clicked with reading his work and understanding the atomic methodology. We had a lot of talk of design systems at that time, and then this is the first time it clicked for me when I was reading Brad Frost's work. AI is huge. So let me share a little bit about where we're at with AI to our viewers. Essentially, we have an AI component creator now in both UXPin Classic and Merge. And you have few approaches. You can actually, it could be prompt based, right? And you can ask it to design certain things and give it the specs. And of course, the better your prompts are, the better results you're going to get. But you can take that further. You can actually create sketches and little doodles and have it use that as reference as well. Or you can take screenshots of flat websites already and have it recreate that with the design system of your choice. For example, if you don't have a design system, you can leverage one of the many open source ones that are plugged into this mechanism and develop things in Ant Design or MUI or Bootstrap, or we're about to release ShadCN. We're also looking at Shopify. As you mentioned, this is a big one for e-commerce. But there's another level to this. What we're trying to do with AI is plug it into the processes. So instead of just spitting out something you're stuck with, you're still the designer, you're still the producer, the composer of what you're trying to do. So aside from the AI component creator, we have an AI helper at the different levels. So you can tell it to create a pricing page with three levels of pricing for a product. And then you click into the card that it created for the pricing, and you can then use the helper to iterate on that. Change this, we should include more information on X, Y, and Z, and this should have been a 3-column format and so forth. And then it does that. And then you iterate. You continue drilling down. Since everything is nested in atomic format, you can use the helper either at a composition level all the way down to a single component level. So either the whole card or the button that is within the card, you can address those concerns with AI. And when it's going to get really powerful, we've invited you to, as being one of our clients who has the most evolved design system, to actually tie in your design system with AI, meaning it becomes a designer. It knows your use cases. It knows the do's and don'ts.
It comes alive.
It knows how to structure your layouts that you mentioned, how your grids are set up. So now you're using AI to learn your component, your technology, as well as your design language, as well as your tech stack. And now you're using AI to its full capacity.
And that's a real important thing to mention, is that we've gotten into putting patterns in now. And this is something to note, just to kind of back up a little bit, just a fun thing to note. It's interesting, ideation, right? How we understand how we break things down and make them better. All right. And it's a slippery slope when you think about a design system. When you get into like organisms, things start to get really tied together. Mm-hmm. Right. So when you're in UXPin and you're designing with coded elements, this is a layer that's complex because I can't ideate it. It's kind of locked. Right. So we've decided that, as best practice, and again, going back to philosophy, right? Like how should you start to look at designing this, right? So we've now decided that the organisms, we actually create patterns with those so that we can ideate them and break them apart within UXPin. And the structure still matches the one that's all tied together. It's just broken apart. Really nice. You know what I mean? So we can edit it and ideate it and stuff like that. And that's something that we've gotten into doing. And it's been pretty good, for that kind of approach, right? So that gets you back into the AI conversation, right? Where it's like, let's say you have, and in our situation, we do have this, where you have designers that are like, hey, look, I need to come up with a design for this page, but I don't have a design tool. What are you guys using? And then we go, well, we have UXPin. You guys could use that. Well, how do you design with that? Well, guess what? Check this out. Why don't you come over here and I'll show you? And then they get the AI prompt, and it's like, okay, just tell it what you want. Tell it you want, a content banner with a headline, and you want a primary button with this is the label, and I need, section 2 column, and I need a parallax, and I need, right? They start to understand the language of how the design system works.
Mm-hmm.
And this is where UXPin starts to train, like you were saying, the user. Every time they use the AI prompt, they are going to get something spit out, and it's going to give them some reference to structure, and they're going to learn overnight what the expected predictable, again, going back to predictability, like what is actually supposed to happen. And I think that's where AI really helps us, right? The more and more we use it, the more and more you recognize, okay, that is probably the right way to do that. Now, with the question that, AI could be wrong, but typically with something that you're giving it the language to, you're really hoping that it's really helping you emphasize what you uploaded to it. And I think what you demoed looks like it'll do it really well. So I'm excited to try it out, because I think we have a lot of designers that are going to love that piece. I know I'll use it, even though I've done plenty from scratch. I'm going to be using it all day long. So,
Yeah, great. And I mean, as you experienced, Natalie is a great customer success manager. And Natalie, can you kind of talk a little bit about what sets us a little different from in terms of customer service and guiding you through the process as they consult with you and our trial experience? Maybe give an overview of what they can expect.
We definitely try to give the white glove treatment to everyone that's looking into UXPin or trialing UXPin. But we are here to support whoever is doing a trial, and we have training sessions, we have demos to walk you through everything. But in addition to that, when you're trialing your component library, we have an integration call just to kind of walk you through the steps, or Jack will be explaining what those steps are, and so that you can test UXPin with your own components.
Right. And we set up a communication channel where your developers, your designers, your whole team is in contact with me and Natalie directly. We consult on your processes. We essentially, the growing pains that Brian had to figure out on his own, we now can help you and guide you through that process to eventually get to a place where you have a fully integrated component-driven design system like AAA uses. And again, if you have your own design system in your company and it's ready to go, consult with us, reach out to us, and we'd love to integrate your components, get you on a trial. If you don't have a design system, now is the time. There's no more pushing pixels and reinventing the wheel. There's plenty of open source design systems that are ready to go that you can just slap on your theming layer over and your business rules, and you're ready to go. So again, Merge can help you with that in a very economical way. Mm-hmm. So Brian, thank you, man. You've always been great at explaining, very eloquent in the way you explain things, and I think you've given our viewers here quite the journey of how you evolved to be where you're at.
Yeah, and one thing I did want to mention real quick, because I'm sure maybe some of the people watching are gonna watch this, right? Like I didn't really touch on my team, a whole lot, right? Just touched on it a little bit, but I have to tell you that whenever you're dealing with design process in a big company, right, you got to build the right team. Because when I started, I was the only one, and we kind of slowly ramped up as we showed the sophistication that our skills could provide, right, to stakeholders and to the bigger picture and even to the development effort, right? So you got to have a good team in place.
Absolutely.
To really be efficient, because you don't need a big team to do this type of work that we've talked about in this podcast. It doesn't take a big team. It takes a team that just is passionate and understands what to do. So you don't need like a big development team or a bunch of people. You could have a nice boutique team that just understands what they're trying to achieve, and they will do it because it's just work. That's all it is. It's not super hard. It's not like, you know what I mean? But again, in my situation, big company, you got to justify the means, but it was easy to do. Just had to put the work in. So I just wanted to put that out there. My team is a really great team. It's the best team I've been on in my career, and my manager, all designers on the team, everybody that I work with, like it's never could have happened without all their help. So I just wanted to put that out there.
Yeah,
You know?
and shout out to Francisco, who I've worked with.
Oh yeah.
Of you, he's your development counterpart, who's also was in all these consultations that we've done with you. So yeah, absolutely.
Ben, yeah.
Oh
Yeah,
yeah, and you got Ben too, you know, on my team.
Yeah.
You know, he's been along the ride and the journey and stuff like that, which has been great. But yeah, Francisco, again, you know, the right team, the right manager, the right people in place that know how to see into things and say, okay, look, I think I agree with you. The efficiency is going to be there, and they'll take the hit for the team to say, hey, look, I believe in this. We should do it, because that takes, you know, that's what you need. You need leaders that believe in what you're doing, right? And then once you get it in place, it'll sell itself. And I 100% believe that after doing everything we've done with you guys, right? So, yeah.
Well, thank you, Brian. Thank you. And also thank you for AAA for allowing us to show a little bit of, you know, give us some transparency on your processes and your evolution. It's really great to be able to have you as a client, and we're very grateful.
I'm very excited, looking forward to working with you more as we, you know, discuss and share the UXPin and Merge AI capabilities with the other teams.
Yeah, no problem. I really appreciate you guys big time, and I'm glad that I've got to work with you guys as much as I have. It's been awesome, and I've learned a lot, so I appreciate it. And definitely in the future, I'm open to come on and do a demo of all our stuff, you know, to some degree for the viewers. I think it'll be helpful. I know this was more of like an introduction. Let's just talk. But definitely in the future, I'd have no problem. I could definitely schedule something up that would be able to show what I've talked about here today.
That sounds great as a follow-up. I mean, to now visualize all that you mentioned was great.
Yeah. I think all your viewers get a kick out of the output of what our code looks like. Yeah. So.
Yeah. All right. Thanks again to Odell Brewing Company here out of Fort Collins. It was delicious. I have a few more in the refrigerator, and
same here. Mine was great.
Cheers,
I got a little bit left. I actually don't have very much left.
Good. And that's episode 2. We're getting better at this, Natalie. And I guess we'll see you guys next month. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for having me. Have a good one.
Thanks, Brian.